Hey everyone, I'm Bill. I'm with Cali Moto TV, and today we're back in the garage and we are working on our 2015 Yamaha R3. This is Bogman's track bike, and we had a small mishap on it at our season closer in November with Cali track days. Unfortunately, we had the chain get thrown. The link came off and the chain came off the bike. So it gave us a perfect opportunity to do our 415 conversion, which is what we wanted to do with the bike anyways. So we are going to be converting the chain, front sprocket, and rear sprocket on the R3 today. Just to kind of give you guys a little understanding of why we're doing this. Now the R3, it's a little horsepower bike. It's not a big horsepower bike. So the chain can be tiny. We can replace the chain once a year. It's not a big deal. So to have that smaller chain, there's going to be less drag with the chain and sprocket, so it's going to give you a little bit more power. So just to show you the differences between the old chain, the thickness, and the new chain. I mean, the thing looks like a bicycle chain. So this is our old chain, and this is our new 415 chain. So we're going to walk through how to pull off the rear wheel, how to pull off your front and rear sprocket. Go ahead and lay your chain on and tidy everything up. So let's get started. So we're lucky enough to have air compressors and an air gun. If you don't, you're gonna have to use some muscles, but we've got everything laid out. We've got some impact sockets, 1 1/8 inch for the rear. You're also gonna use a 22 millimeter for the rear, and the rear sprocket bolt is 14 millimeter. The front sprocket is, I'll have to get that, I feel like it is the 22, also works. And so, sorry, the 22 is for the rear and the 1 1/8 is for the front sprocket. So if you have a chain on, it's easier to take the front sprocket on and off with the chain on. If you don't have an impact gun. Impact gun is going to be everything when taking the front sprocket off. So we'll go ahead and grab our air line, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to pull the front sprocket off. This is going to be with the 1 1/8. And I'll show you real quick the sprocket here. So we're going to get this sprocket off with the 1 1/8 impact gun. So you're just going to line the impact up with it. And we're going to go into this. And off it comes. So then we're going to just go ahead and slide this spacer and the nut. And the sprocket comes right on off. So we'll go ahead and set these aside for now. Of course, we'll need those later. And we're going to go to our back wheel. Now, we're going to keep our bigger socket up here, and we're going to move to our 22 millimeter socket, which is going to be for our nut side of the rear axle. I also have a 19 millimeter wrench, which we're going to hold the other side, the whole axle nut on. So, axle nut on this side, axle nut on this side. This is the nut that is attached to the axle. This is the nut we're going to be taking off. So, back on the impact. And you've got a nut and washer. I always like to keep everything on this side of the bike, on this side of the bike. Everything that we take off from this side of the bike, obviously we're going to keep on this side of the bike. So, we're going to grab our tire. And we're going to, let's see if we can get the axle started. You can lightly tap it with a mallet if it won't come out. Once it gets started, it should pretty much come out. You don't want to take any hammer, don't mar anything up, okay? Because the nut side is on that side. So we're going to grab a firm hold of the wheel and just pull this axle straight on out. And down comes our wheel. And I'm going to go ahead and grab our ramp. Now, you've got 2 spacers in the wheel of in the wheel, this 2 spacers. Make sure that you keep these spacers on the correct side. Also make sure that you keep these spacers and put them back in when you put the wheel back on. These spacers are super, super important, okay? Again, to each side that they came off of. So now we've exposed our rear sprocket. Now our rear sprocket, we're going to use our impact gun again to take it off. This one is our 14 millimeter. And everything can come off with an impact wrench. Going back on, we do have our torque specification, which I'll talk about that here in a second in the nifty sheet that I have. But with this, we're just going to pull all 5 nuts off, 6 nuts off. Okay, so all right, so now we've got our old 530 sprocket, and just to compare size again, it's so crazy. So this is our 530 and this is our 415. So the gear ratio's changing a bit. Now we've had to convert the gear ratio so that we know this is obviously has a lot more teeth than this one. So we've added more teeth on the sprocket, which is going to change the gear ratio. But with the correct gear ratio tooth sprocket change, we're going back to, I believe, 1 down in the front and 2 up in the rear from the factory setting. So a little bit more horsepower, a little bit more straight off the line. We're going to lose a teeny bit on the top end, but of course this bike really doesn't have a top end, so it's really designed for that smaller track. So old and new. So we're going to go ahead and we can just lay that right there. Let's go ahead and set this one down. So our torque sheet. I was lucky enough, we'll link this down below. Make sure you take a look. I found this particular one on Google, and this is specific for the R3, and it's every torque specification that you need for the R3. So we've got our 3 major torque specifications that we need: the rear axle nut, the rear sprocket axles, or the rear sprocket nuts, and then the front sprocket nut. Now the rear axle and the rear sprocket nuts do not require Loctite, but the front sprocket nut does require Loctite. So I've made sure that I've got my Loctite here for the front nut. So the rear sprocket torque specification for the R3 is 49 foot-pounds of torque. So we're going to take our nuts and we can go ahead and start them with our impact gun, but we do not want to, impact them in. We just basically want to get them down until it stops. And we are going in a crisscross pattern. We want to go in a star shape, okay? All right, so now we're going to go ahead and grab our our torque wrench. We're going to set our torque wrench at, again, 49 foot-pounds of torque. So we'll squeeze this up to 40 and 9. So if you don't have a torque wrench, it's super important to have the torque wrench, especially for certain things like this, because we obviously don't want to lose any axle nuts. We don't want to lose any sprocket nuts, especially the front sprocket nuts. So we want to make sure it's Loctited on and torqued to the correct specification. Now, once you've got it set with the torque wrench, and we're going to again go in the star, so you're going to hear that click is what you're looking for on the torque wrench. So, and we're again working in our star pattern. All right. So now the rear sprocket is back on and we're ready to actually put the wheel back on the bike. Now this is where, if you've got a second hand, can help. A little bit of struggle with keeping the spacers in there, getting the brake disc in there, getting all of the axle nuts in. So it's a little bit of finagling. We do have actually zip tied up our R3 rear brake, so it makes it easy to be able to slide the rear brake disc right into the brake and line up the axle. So first thing we are going to do is go ahead and get our spacers back in. And we're going to line everything up and get our axle ready to go into our, in through the wheel, okay? So once you've got the axle started, you can free your hands and you can finagle back on this side for threading the axle all the way through the wheel and the spacer, which we've got it on that side now. We're going to go ahead and add our washer and nut, finger tight only. We're not going to torque it yet because we will need to make adjustments once we get the chain on. So the wheel should be able to move freely back and forth, okay? All right. Now we're going to move back up to our front sprocket. And we've got our new 415 sprocket and nut and washer. So the sprocket has a front and rear side. So we're using a Vortex, all Vortex front and rear sprocket and EK chain. Thank you, Vortex. Vortex hooks us up. We definitely can't do it without them. All of our bikes have Vortex stuff on it. So make sure you go to Vortex to take a look. But the Vortex sprockets have a flat and lipped side. So if you look here, you'll see that there's a little lip. That is going to be facing on the outside of the bike. Okay, so this is going to slide right onto our sprocket nut, and you'll see right here where it just slides right on. And once we've got it on here, we'll go ahead and take our washer and our nut, and on we go. And we're going to go finger tight with this again, only finger tight, because now in order to get that torqued correctly, you're going to have to run the chain and have the tension on the chain. I do want to also, I forgot, Loctite. So I'm going to back the nut off just a teeny bit, put a couple dabs of Loctite on there, and then run it back through. So on the threads of the nut, on the thread of the sprocket is fine, whichever you prefer. Wipe off a little bit of the excess. And then again, we're going to torque that down afterwards. Now we're going to take our chain. If you've not dealt with a brand new chain, make sure you have gloves on. And I am going to probably change my gloves after dealing with the chain because it's very, very sticky. It's very, very greasy. So what we want to do is we want to first lay our chain down on our wheel and lay it out. And we're going to pull the wheel and chain up through to the front sprocket. We're going to lay it around the front sprocket. And leave it a little bit of room because we're going to bring, the front sprocket's not going to move. The rear wheel will move, but the front sprocket won't. So we want to make sure that there's enough room that at about this position, you're meeting the two together, okay? Just a little bit more. All right, and we'll pull this through. So I'm going to do just a tad more. So now our chain and sprocket should meet, which they do. We had an unfortunate incident with, we received our first chain and the chain conversion was off. We actually got a 133 chain and I believe we needed a 143 chain. So we had to order another chain because it wasn't long enough. So make sure you do the conversion correctly, because the conversion for the 415 chain, because it is smaller, you are going to need more links, although it's the same size. So, and of course, in the sprocket, or excuse me, the chain, you are going to get, you're going to get your link and the spacer that goes on and the locking link. Okay, the locking link, if you can see it here, slides on and goes on to a notch. You're going to take a pair of pliers and clip that in. Once it's clipped in, they shouldn't come out. Now, I believe this was the culprit of why we lost the chain. Sometimes these clips do come out. It does make it easier to change the chain, but you run the risk of this. Now, again, we were lucky enough not to have any damage. It could be catastrophic. This chain could come back in and hit the crankcase and take out your whole motor. Again, we were lucky enough that it didn't do any damage. So what you're gonna first do is take your link, take your link, and you're gonna thread it in from the back side to the front so you can work on the front side. So grab it over here. All right, so once the link's in, we're holding, right? So now you're going to take just, let's see, sticky hands, is just the extra link, and you're going to slide it right on the two prongs. And then we're going to take our locking link, and it's gonna go in and clip inwards. My hands are very sticky, so I'm gonna change my gloves now because I can't really feel that link. And I'm gonna grab a set of needle nose and a regular set of pliers. I believe the needle nose will work, but this might be just enough to pull that clip and clip it into place. So we are getting a little Jack Roach's old 300 here. It's going to be delivered in the next couple days. We're going to be doing some TLC work apparently to it, but we'll be bringing it out to our Cali track days as well, so that will be fun. Me and Bogna fight over this 300. All right, we don't really fight over it. She just pretty much rides it all the time, but every once in a while I steal it from her. It's a fun little bike. Like I've said in the past, and the 300 isn't a bike that I really expected that I would have as much fun as I do. But these little bikes, they're such a blast. Obviously I love my Gixxer 1000 and I love my BMW, but to get on this thing and it's just like you're full throttle and full brake all the time. It's just a blast. So anyways, so again, we're gonna take our link and we're gonna slide it in. And once we've got that in, we've got to pop that link together. And so let me show you here. All right, so as you can see, here is our link. And you can see the link needs to be squeezed together. Let's see if I can do this with one hand. Can I borrow you? So we're going to grab the black part of the link and squeeze them together, and there you go. So now it's nice and tight, and that link will not come out, hopefully. All right, so now we've got the link put on, we've got the chain put on, we've got the sprocket put on. Now we're going to work from the front sprocket to the back, and we're going to now torque the front sprocket to its specification. The front sprocket specification for the nut is 54 foot-pounds of torque. So we'll grab again our torque wrench, and we're going to adjust this up from 49 to 54. And again, we're just going to wait until that click. Okay? Now, I'm going to go ahead and throw it in neutral, spin it around, throw it back into first, and just double check. And there we go. So now we're going to move back to our back axle nut. And we're going to go ahead and we've got it hand tight on the other side. So we're going to go ahead and tighten this rear up. And now we don't want to go too tight, just finger hand tight, because we do want to be able to adjust our chain now. Now we've got it out just enough. So as you can see, we've got it all the way back, and you can see we've got a little bit of play. We're going to go ahead and button it up for now, but we are going to have to cut off a link or two. But just for video purposes, we're not going to pull the chain back off on the video and whatnot. But just to show you, this is too much play for the tightness of the wheel already. So what we are going to do is I'm going to pull the chain back off the link. I'm just going to cut probably 2 links off, maybe just 1, and then we'll put it all back together. But for video's sake, we're just going to go ahead and grab our 19 millimeter, and we're going to grab our 22 millimeter for this side, and our torque specification for the rear axle nut is 41 foot-pounds of torque. So we're going to back this down to 41. 19 millimeter on this side, 22 on this side. Now, obviously, again, we want to have the chain adjusted before we get to here, but and there we go. So now we've got everything buttoned up. We do always want to make sure that we've got one final button up. We want to make sure we run that torque wrench back through the rear axle, the side sprockets, and the front sprocket, just to make sure that everything's all set up. Now, again, you want to make sure that the chain has just a little bit of play. You don't want to have like this much play, if you can see it. Let's grab our GoPro. And, you know, this much play is about where we want to be. This much play is far too much. So we do want to make sure that we take off a couple links here. So we will add in, let's go ahead and add in the final play. And we'll do a quick little video once we snip it out, and just to follow that up. But anyways, that's it. So very simple. 20, 30 minutes in your garage if you've got a nice lift. If not, you'll be working on the ground a little bit. But anyways, once it's all set up, make sure you ride it get a mile or so on it, and then make sure you recheck the adjustment of the chain, because the chain is going to stretch right off the gate. So we want to make sure that that's all set. But anyways, so we're all done with our R3 in the rear sprocket. We are 415 bicycle chain, and we're going to get this tested out in, I think this weekend. I think we're going to go to the track. We're going to go to the little go-kart track. But anyways, thanks for following us, guys. Make sure you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, shoot us a like. If you've got any comments, make sure you do it down below. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. Important that you hit the subscribe button. Please, please, please also hit the bell button. Make sure you get those notifications for the next video. Anyways, till then, Bill with Cali Moto. Thank you, guys.